Welcome to Life by Design, episode 381. Welcome to Life by Design. I'm your host, Dr. Jamie Richards, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Dr. Horatio Jug.
I think considering current circumstances, I'm even more happy to be doing something that I like doing right now.
Well, you know what's interesting? We've really been following social distancing on the podcast for about 4 or 5 years.
That's true. That's true.
We were ahead of the curve, Horatio.
Yeah, I wish we didn't have to. I wish that curve didn't exist, but it does, and you're right.
Yes. I wish it wasn't a mandated curve, but it is what it is. And so we won't turn this into a political conversation today. We're actually talking about health, which I know seems odd, maybe on some level, just because of what's going on. And there's probably lots of content being published all over the world on the current status and state of the world. But the issue is, and I was saying this in our pre-show, to me, the real sad part of this is for a lot of people, I think they're going to ignore their health during this time. Things are tougher, right? I mean, it may be tougher to keep up a workout schedule, more difficult to have that community of people that you're with all the time. But, we want to talk about health because I think it's important we bring some focus and attention back to that.
Well, it's interesting that you bring this up. I think this is important to mention. I'll plug my own podcast, but I just did an episode on this right now because there seems to be that there's two current levels to process like life in general right now, which is, day by day, I'll take it as it comes. And the other side that's like, listen, you need to get back to some type of normalcy, be as productive as you can. There's great opportunity now, and when you first hear that, it almost seems like those two opinions are dramatically at odds, but it's not true, right? Like you want to be as productive as possible, but you get to choose what values you get to focus on because you're the driver of your life, right? Like if you're under a ton of stress right now, like productivity can be, I want to go out for a walk, right? Like that could be a huge step forward for you at this time. And I would consider that being productive because your health is important.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's the important conversation during this time is like, you can't just throw everything up in the wind, but if you're really stressed out and really scared, it's ridiculous to think that you can return to normal life and pretend like nothing's happening around the world.
Yeah, another way we've discussed this on Think by Design podcast before, but the difference between a growth and a fixed mindset, right? This idea that, are you going to cash it all in and give up? Or are you going to, and trust me, it's not to say that there have not been some moments, I'm not impervious to, the real world and reality. And there's definitely been some moments of distress and like, what are we going to do? And how are we going to make this work? The difference is, and this is always the case, not just at this time, but in any time is how do you react? And, with the growth mindset, the reaction is, okay, I need to figure this out. And I don't know all the answers, that's for sure. I've got some things figured out and now it's just a matter of putting those into action.
Yep, me too. I'm in the same boat, right? Like we were talking about, it's almost like, how they have like that cycle of like, when people are going to die, there's like anger and then there's grief and then there's like acceptance. Right? To say that like the same isn't happening is untrue. Of course it's happening.
That's exactly. And actually, Dana and I were talking about this yesterday because it's March now. And we were just saying, in December, my dad.
It's April.
It's April. Okay, sorry. It is all. Yeah, I get it. In December, my dad passed away, and if you look at the different, I forget the scale, but there's the grading of life events, divorces, and deaths of family members, and financial collapse or businesses failing, and just to think of those two things happening in the last 5 months. And the amount of stress that's delivered, it's been quite a whirlwind, not just for us, but I'm sure for everybody.
Yeah. Sorry, man.
No, it happens. And I think that's the point is, are we just going to fall into the fixed mindset? Or are we going to move into the growth mindset? And so with that said, let's talk today very briefly about this research study that you came across. And now that we've given us some context, Chris, you'll tell us a bit about the study.
Yeah, so it's I think it's from Ireland. It was, and I hate using these terms, but it was looking at the effects of manipulation in populations diagnosed with generalized nonspecific low back pain. Small study, 25 people, but they covered a significant level of depth in that it's a randomized controlled trial, which means that they divided the two groups. They divided the population into two groups. Half the group got a manipulation, I'm using air quotations, and the other half of the group got a fake manipulation. And then after 5 weeks, so they gave them I think they gave them three. And then after 5 weeks, they put everybody back into the MRI scanner and they measured for any changes. And it was really cool that the people who received the real manipulation had a change in brain chemistry as seen on the MRI, and the people who received the sham did not. Not to mention that the people who got the manipulation also noticed changes in their, I think, Oswestry scale and another pain indicator scale. So all in all, pretty cool. You know, the conclusion is that we're starting to see changes in the brain happen with things happening to the spine, and I think that's a very important finding for our profession.
Yes. So this brings us to a lot of questions and commentary here. Number one, I think that what we can say across what the research is telling us, and it's so funny because I had. There was some posting on my social media a couple of weeks ago, and I stay out of it. And somebody was, posting about, chiropractic, and there's no research. And it's just always funny when somebody who has no idea posts that there's no research. Just, I have to laugh because, what about all the research? Well, there's no research. Well, what about all this research? And so, no research. I think you got to be careful when you say there's no anything, because, you can almost find anything in anywhere. But anyway. The fact of the matter is what I see and what I feel confident in saying is that, better movement of the spine has an effect on the nervous system, and the nervous system is the body's self-regulating system. And so when the nervous system is affected, other body systems are affected. So, I don't think anybody can disagree with that. That to me is, you'd have a hard time debating whether better spinal movement had an effect on the neurology and the nervous system is important for the body's function. So if we can agree on that, that's the baseline of all this. And then you start looking at, what are the outcomes of these different research studies? It's nice. We've got a randomized control trial, a small group, but that's fine. But we see this change in the brain. So it wasn't just less pain. It was also a change in the brain. And I think that's, to me, the most interesting of all the data.
Yeah. Yes, I think you're absolutely right. I think there is one of the conversations that needs to happen around this conversation of research that, the people who say that there's no research fail to clarify what good research looks like. And I think that is, that's a big problem that needs to be discussed and lobbied for by the groups in favor of chiropractic. But yes, the thing that's awesome is that there's neurological changes happening. I believe in the article, the authors noted that similar changes have been seen just when exercise has been applied in general. It changes all forms of movement, not just movement to the spine, like any type. When you start moving your body, good things happen.
And you move your spine, right? You can't move your body without moving the spine.
Yeah, it's impossible.
So this leads us to the next point, which is, and this study didn't look at this, but the difference between a manipulation and a correction or an adjustment. I think that's, an area of research that needs to be done. Are we just generalizing motion, which, say exercise would do, or are we able to specifically correct a movement deficiency with the spine? So are we able to actually correct something that isn't moving properly and allow it to move better? Would we see a change there? Would it be a significant change to the brain or other measurements comparative to just a manipulation?
I think that's an interesting question. I still think we're trying to get, the medical sciences in general to accept the priority fact that moving the spine is good for the person. Mm-hmm. I think we're still stuck there before we start talking about that question. But I think that's still an interesting question to think about and to discuss.
Well, and that's where the context gets, distorted is, and this is where the debate lies, is people are, and especially whether it be a medical professional saying, well, what does chiropractic treat? What does chiropractic cure? Because that's how medicine is built. We say, here's the condition, here's the therapy. Did it work? Did it not work? But what's interesting is, that's not how we approach exercise. I mean, it is in some areas, but most people in exercise physiology, they look at exercise and say, well, there's generalized benefits to the heart, there's generalized benefits to the immune system, there's generalized benefits to all these different areas. To me, that's where we need to apply chiropractic, right? And we've always said this, it needs to be taken out of the therapeutic realm and into the realm of, okay, there's a problem with the spine. That's the problem we fix. And when we fix that problem, what's the outcome?
Sure, but that's we've been pointing the finger. Like, that's not medicine's job. That's chiropractic's job.
Correct.
We need to look within our own profession and say, listen, here's what the data is showing us. This is what we can get behind and form a profession based on these parameters, and leave the treatment of disease to the medical profession, which is what they've been doing since its inception. That's the purpose of the profession.
That's right. And we've been, advocates all along of medical care properly applied and chiropractic care properly applied, and working together to help people, be as healthy as absolutely possible. And I think it leads us to the last point, which is, something that we've been preaching about for 20 years now, really, as crazy as that sounds, is that, chiropractic especially in the terms of how we talk about it, is applicable to more areas than just, lower back pain. And that's where, I know my wall, your wall, we've got our success wall, hundreds and hundreds of cases, thousands of cases, and tens of thousands worldwide of people have seen other benefits to receiving chiropractic care to the spine. And to me, although it could be, because I know my first thought, Horatio, is to say, well, that can't all be, incorrect. But I know philosophically, you'll tell me it could all be incorrect because, 1 billion people in China can still be wrong, as you've taught me. If something's wrong, it's wrong. It doesn't matter if it's 1 or 1 billion. But my point is, the evidence is pointing towards very strongly that when you move the spine, there's effects that go beyond just the localized area. And we can see when we do the MRI study, and there's other studies that have been done that look at brain function. I think that's why the chiropractic care applied to the spine has more of a global effect, is not because it actually, takes pressure, quote unquote, or unpinches a nerve. It's because of its effect on the brain.
Yeah, I think the problem here, though, again, it lies within our profession, is the way that this is communicated, right? You can't, there's no, and here's where the lack of evidence comes in, right? Because, so you have again, the purpose of chiropractic care is proper movement of the spine. Mm-hmm. The outcome or success of chiropractic care is based on whether you've achieved that movement. Now, you can't make a solid prediction necessarily as to how that's going to result, or what symptomatically or physiological specific changes the person is going to have.
Right.
Right. Nope. I think that's that's the issue that gets a lot of chiropractors into trouble is they're saying that this is going to happen, mm-hmm. when you don't know whether that's going to happen or not. What's going to happen is the spine's going to move better, and there's going to be like you said, a positive generalized effect on neurology in the body.
Yep. No, I think that hits it. And I think that was really the point we wanted to get across today, guys. And so the take home here is that even if you're tied up and you can't get out of the house, or you're having a difficult time finding your community or getting to your chiropractor, whatever the challenges are, it's still important, and maybe even more important than ever, to figure out a way to incorporate health into your day-to-day lifestyle. So I know that, Horatio and I have posted lots of videos online. You've got this podcast as a resource, lots of stuff on social media right now. So take advantage of all those things. And as always, thank you for joining the drive to 1 million families worldwide living life by design.